Hello and welcome to the latest in Inlet Asia's Expert Insight series. Today I'm delighted to be joined by another of our advisory board members, Joerg Gmeinbauer. Joerg is Global Vice President of Power and Utilities for Bureau Veritas. Joerg, it's good to speak to you again. Thank you very much for agreeing to chat.
Pleased to be with you, Simon. Good morning.
There's one thing that's on everyone's mind at the moment, unfortunately still. I'd like to ask you about the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. How do you see it having impacted the region's power sector compared to other global power markets?
That's of course the obvious questions. Nowadays, people tend to start an interview. To be honest, I believe, I truly believe that the global industry has behaved remarkably, in the last 6 months. And obviously at the beginning, we were all a little bit, frightened that this is gonna be bad, and we saw all the demand going down and lockdowns coming in, and it was difficult to deploy people to sites and of course make sure everybody's safe, which is what was on everybody's minds. And then on the utility side, you would see that many governments would say, okay, you cannot disconnect customers even if they wouldn't pay their bills or default altogether, and that has put a lot of strain on the industry, globally speaking. But if you look at what is our actual purpose to deliver secure, sustainable, and affordable power to the world, we did continue to do that, and we did continue doing that. Not only at a global level, we certainly did the same in Southeast Asia, and I think what we can certainly see from this whole experience of the last few months, there's been a stronger global community coming together through this crisis, exchanging a lot of information on the business continuity plans, on the emergency responses, and I think everybody has benefited from that. We've actually been benefiting from in Europe from a lot of what we've learned in Asia. At the beginning, of course, in China, where we have a very large operation, but then also Southeast Asia, and I think there's been a lot of learning which we've been able to take out, how to deploy people in such a scenario, to be able to do that safely, which we then deployed in Europe in the same way. And then of course today our focus is a lot on Americas, where this pandemic is still having a lot of impact on everybody's mind. So in a nutshell, I think we all can be very proud of what we did in the last 6 months. So that's my answer.
There's been some interesting sort of short-term impacts from the ongoing sort of health crisis. We've seen higher penetration of renewables in Europe, for example. What longer-term impacts, if any, do you feel or do you expect the ongoing crisis to have on the energy transition, specifically in Southeast Asia?
Look, I think if you'd asked me that question a few months ago, maybe my answer would have been different. There was a lot of bad mood, I think, in March, April, a lot of doomsayers in the market saying, okay, now we're gonna, we all need to refocus on something different. We need to refocus and keep going, and why talk about the distant future, and policymakers will need to make sure that rescue the world, rather than building a nice future. Now, if you look at it today, all the opposite has happened. I think, and I think we can be all very happy about that, because the energy transition, at least from our point of view, has got a lot of momentum this year. We've been seeing actually a relatively stable renewable sector this year. Even though the impact, of course, was there, but if you compare it to other sectors, it was much less. And I think on top of what we see being delivered this year, we're seeing a lot of momentum coming up on some very positive developments, which will, I think, have a strong impact on next year and the years to come. And I think there's obviously many reasons for that, but I'd like to point out three. First, I think this whole pandemic has changed the mindset of this world with regard to the perception of what a global crisis can do to this planet. Now, for the problem of climate change has always been, that's something for the future, that's not impacting my current life. And is a global crisis really possible in this world? I would say rather no. Now, not today. I think many people would answer differently. I think this has brought a new spin to the whole conversation, and I think we'll take a lot of positive momentum from that on a more emotional level, I think, than we've just had before the crisis. So that's one part of the story. Then, of course, and this is, I think, a lucky development when you look at what policymakers, or not policymakers only, governments actually are doing around the world. In the past, we've often seen that out of economic crisis, stimulus to reactivate economies is going into industries where you have strong incumbents sitting to try to protect their legacy, which in our world would be the coal and gas of this world today. Policymakers have actually decided to say, okay, if we need to spend a lot of money, let's try to solve not only the current economic climate, but also let's try to spend this money on areas of the economy which will help us solving the other problem, which is the energy transition. So there is, and it's obviously not the same everywhere, but I can certainly tell you that in Southeast Asia we're seeing more and more projects this year, more than we expected being unlocked and being happening. And I think that the third reason why all of this is happening is absolutely unrelated to COVID. It's just that all of this hits at a time when the cost level of renewables has broken a limit which is just making them so commercially available to everywhere around the world, that we've seen markets exploding. Think about offshore wind. I mean, who would have thought a few years ago that we're going to see very near-term offshore wind projects happening in Southeast Asia region? Or who would have thought that we see the PPAs at the cost level we're seeing today for solar? So that is probably one of the, let's say, the underlying reasons why all of this is happening, and why also in an economic climate where cost is absolutely important because we're going through a tough time, the obvious answer is energy transition and not sticking to the lead.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. What are the three major trends then, or the biggest trends that you see impacting the industry most in the next 5 years? And perhaps you can give us some insight into how Bureau Veritas is aligning to capitalize on these.
Yeah. So, I mean, coming back to my previous point, if you ask me for three trends, it would be probably low carbon, but because that's the big thing which is in fact happening. And for what does it mean for us? At Bureau Veritas, we've been in renewables since somewhere around 15 to 20 years now, so it's not a new story to us. We've been involved in the construction of around 90 gigawatt of renewables capacity all around the world, in offshore wind, in onshore wind, in solar. But still, for us, what we see, the pace of change we are seeing now in this year especially, and the projection for next year is stunning, is really stunning, and especially in some of the technologies which we didn't expect to offtake so quickly, like in offshore wind. So for us, it means accelerate the localization of our services. We're investing strongly into transferring some of the capabilities we have in Europe into the Asia region. We do at the same, use our strong organization in China to support Chinese customers, which play a significant role in the Southeast Asia region, also on the energy transition, and strengthen our local setup, which in the Southeast Asia region is a few thousand people today. But of course, the renewables teams, we continue strengthening with the different services we offer from the front end, project certification, permitting support, design support, and then of course taking care of projects being constructed from a procurement side, but also from a construction side. And I think what is important to us, because if you look at BV, we're a very old company, 190 years old, and we've been something around 100 years in power. So we have been involved in the construction of many conventional assets, coal, gas. So we later on with the nuclear, and only in a fraction of our lifespan, we've been now working in renewables, and we don't want to present ourselves as a fancy renewables boutique who picks out the nice green cherries from the cake. We feel we have a commitment to the companies we've been working for in the last decades, who has sit on a wide stock of legacy coal and gas assets, and somebody needs to take care of these assets before they eventually gonna be phased out, and they need to be operated safely and to the best possible performance. So we try to sit between those two worlds and really use our own experience of going through this transformation to help other customers of us and other stakeholders to do the same. So that's I think that the big story of the next 5 years. Now, if you ask me two others, maybe just two minor points. There's obviously the big world of digitalization. I try to kind of be very careful with that, because I think there's a lot of buzzwords in the industry, and everybody's talking about artificial intelligence and blockchain and digital twins, and if you go to if you ask a few questions, then you will very often see there's nice ideas, but when it really comes to the ground, they are difficult to assess. What we can say from our helicopter of somebody who does conformity assessment in the widest sense of the word, we see that data as such, or some might call it the digital asset, is becoming almost equally important than the physical asset, like a pressure vessel or a transformer or whatever. So for us, it means we have the challenge to make sure that for our customers that we can help them to maintain the data integrity and the data reliability of these digital assets, which are being created or by nature create themselves out of the big amount of data which is being created. And that to some degree transforms our industry, but I wouldn't talk yet about the revolution. This is more of an evolutionary process, where we don't see the physical asset conformity assessment being replaced, but is definitely being treated complementary now with the digital assets, which gives a completely different angle to what we do, and increasingly that will have an impact on our daily inspection work on physical assets the same. And then the third point I wanted to really quickly raise was supply chains, and this is indeed related to COVID, but I don't think it's caused by COVID. It was just made visible, by COVID, that we do have, because of the developments of the last few years, quite a bit of vulnerabilities in the way how we constructed our supply chains in the power industry, and more owner operators, OEMs, are seeing that they've gone down a route which was of course cost driven to some degree, but has put a certain lack of resilience into systems. And when you then get into a situation where logistics make it difficult, to have a plan B and a plan C, then supply chain resilience becomes a major topic. And that, in combination to, I think, a bigger drive towards localization in many countries, will, we believe, see a lot of changes in supply chain flows in the time to come. And of course, we are preparing for that. We've just recently launched a new product called Supply R, where we are focusing on supply chain resilience for customers, where we assess the supply chains of our customers with regard to a certain catalog of criteria, and help them to optimize the way and build some redundancy into their supply chains to be better prepared for disruptive situations than in the past.
Yeah. It's interesting you raised the supply chain topic there. It's certainly something that I've come across quite a lot. I'd be interested to know from your perspective then, what changes do you anticipate for Southeast Asia specifically?
Yeah, I think like many of the things I've been talking about, there's Southeast Asia is actually it's not an place in the world where you would see so tremendously different effects being seen in the industry. I think we do have a similar situation where South probably somewhere between the European or US European and the Chinese supply chains, and struggle with the same problem that we've gone down a more cost-driven route to supply chains. We also see in Southeast Asia the demand to become to some degree more local in certain areas. When you look at renewables, for example, and I think to overcome these problems, actually the energy transition helps, because here we have a way to look at a relatively new industry if you compare it with the conventional power sector, and build it in a better way right from the start. And I think that will be very true, the same for Southeast Asia as it will for the rest of the world.
Yeah. My last question, we started out with COVID. We have touched on lower carbon, and we've sort of fallen back into discussing the ongoing health crisis. Certainly wasn't my intention, but all very relevant and important topics. My last question is, the pandemic's obviously brought around a sort of hygiene revolution in many sectors, to be able to restart businesses in a safe way. How well do you see the power sector coping with increased health and hygiene awareness, and with protecting people and other stakeholders in their operations?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Bureau Veritas is a relatively diversified business, so we do have a lot of exposure to sectors which have a lot of more direct interaction with private individuals and a lot of stakeholders on the streets. Yeah, call it so. So we're present also in sectors like hotels, restaurants, retail stores, etc. So when the lockdown situation started to ease in countries, we started working with our customers on help make sure they follow and implement the right protocols to restart their businesses. So we call that the product Safeguard Restart with BV, which was mainly about consulting and auditing businesses if they operate in compliance, of course, with their local legal requirements, but more than that, with global best practice with regard to protecting their employees, protecting all the other stakeholders, and making sure they can take the maximum economic benefit of restarting their businesses, and at the same time making sure there's nothing happening to the people involved, and we keep, of course, the overall pandemic situation low. Now, and that's been this still is a very important work stream, relatively new to us also in this year. Now the power sector obviously is different. We never stopped. Yeah, we were declared critical industry in all countries around the world, and
Sure.
But there is a situation which I think is we're not recently moving from a more emergency mode back into routine operations. Because what happened in the power sector, why did it work so well? Because we all had our emergency plans in place. We were always asked to be able to react to a situation where we need to keep things going in a critical situation for society, because we are so important. So, but on the other hand, you cannot maintain an emergency mode forever. At some point, you need to go back into routine operations, and this is where we also saw a lot of need with a slightly different way of approaching this business, helping utilities who obviously have a lot of interaction with private individuals in the streets, to make sure they they have established the right protocols and safety systems to make sure that they comply with their role in society. But then, of course, also internally in power stations, in construction sites, that their own people are being protected, so they can go back to relatively normal operations while still being able to comply with the regulation and with all health and safety best practice. So I think this topic will remain relevant for some time. Call it hygiene revolution or not, for the power industry it is important, and I think we've done well. And I'm sure we will continue doing well, and we hope, and we're certainly here to contribute and help businesses around the world to do that.
Sure. Yeah, look, that brings us to the end of our chat today. As always, it's been a pleasure speaking. Thanks so much for sharing your insights and taking the time to chat with us.
No, thank you very much, Simon. Equally, the pleasure was on my side, and I hope we'll do this face-to-face next year during NLIT Asia, wherever it takes place.
Oh, I hope so. Thanks so much.
Take care. Thank you.